Now, the Republic of Madagascar is in the grips of its worst political upheaval in over a decade. President Andry Rajoelina is defiant from exile. The parliament had voted for his impeachment, and an elite military unit, that's CAPSAT, now controls the capital. Crucially, the High Constitutional Court has declared the presidency vacant, inviting the military leader to take charge and calling for elections in as little as 30 days. Now, this complex, rapidly evolving situation demands deep analysis. And joining us now, we have Professor Sololo Randrianja, his professor of political history, University of Toamasina in Madagascar. And we also have Paul Melly, his consulting fellow, Africa Program, Chatham House, London, UK. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us. All right, so let me begin with you, Professor Randrianja. Speak to us on the development in Madagascar. How do you assess the constitutional legitimacy of this military takeover?
I would not say that it's entirely 100% military takeover. First of all, the CAPSAT cannot be qualified labeled as an elite unit of the army because it is devoted to administrative tasks. It's a kind of unit in which the officers who were suspected to be like a rebel to the current regime were affected there. So it concentrated a lot of people, a lot of officers were not happy with the former regime. So the armed forces themselves, which are composed by the police forces, the gendarmerie, which is then the elite body of the armed forces, and the army per se, are quite divided in a sense, and they, through this called from outside military coup, they try to find a kind of to set some peaceful relations between them, but they are in rivalries.
Okay, let's hear from Paul as well. Paul, Professor did say that it is not a de facto coup, but that means that it can be defended under any legal or constitutional theory in Madagascar. Let's have your thoughts.
Well, I think this is one of the questions, the difficult questions, that is now confronting not just the CAPSAT unit and its leaders who've taken over, but also other actors in the institutions of the state, such as the Constitutional Court, such as the National Assembly, because back in 2009, there was a military involvement in the removal of a previous elective presidency, that of Marc Ravalomanan, and which actually ended up installing Andry Rajoelina, who's just being overturned now, as the head of a transitional government. And that was not regarded by the outside world as a legitimate constitutional or elected government. And as a result, Madagascar suffered a big drop in international development support. And that had very, very severe impacts on the country over a period of years. And it took several years to resolve, to find a way out of that crisis and have fresh elections. So one of the challenges facing those involved in the present situation is to see if they can find a way that leads back into a political process and eventually the election and the establishment of a new longer-term government, but without having the current situation categorized as a coup. Because if it's classed by the international community as a coup, that could lead to a severe drop in international development support for Madagascar at a very fragile time. So the divisions that the professor referred to are a further element of complexity in the attempt to sort of sort out this situation without leading Madagascar into a sort of backwards in the level of international support that it gets. It's a very difficult situation, but a lot of frustration had built up, of course, before.
Oh, okay. Let's come back to you, Professor Randrianja. Now, Colonel Michael Randrianja announced that they have taken the power, dissolving nearly all state institutions except the lower house. I mean, the Senate, the High Constitutional Court, the Independent National Electoral Commission, the High Court of Justice, and the High Council for the Defense of Human Rights as well. So with so many institutions suspended, who then enforces the law, who checks abuses, who ensures political competition? At the moment, we know it's under the military right now, but then what risks does this pose for rights, corruption, and impunity?
I think it's too early to give a very clear answer to your question, because first of all, everybody is presenting Colonel Michael as he is a president, but in fact he is representing a group of 5 high military officers, police forces, and gendarmerie, which are working inside a committee. I don't remember the name of this committee, but it's some kind of collegial organization, and they are looking for a civilian prime minister now to set up a government. Regarding the legal aspect of this political change at the top of a state, the fact that the parliament has not been dissolved, most of the members of the parliament are still working on, and they were elected contrary to the people from the the Senate and all other bodies. Yeah. So there is certainly a rupture, but it's not that important in the constitutional frame of the new regime in waiting for the elections, which are to be organized during the 2 years' time. And during those 2 years' times, I hope, but there are some projects, I hope that the population will be mobilized to set up a new system of governance in a very large and inclusive movement, such as the national conference, with small conferences organized from the low level. Okay. And bottom-up movement. All
right. Now, I was actually going to ask Paul, but I think you've answered the question. I was going to ask if the military's choice to dissolve some of the institutions but spare the impeachment parliament suggests a political deal. Let's see if you can answer that first, Paul.
Well, I think the professor's made a very important point that the military have not dissolved the National Assembly, and the National Assembly is directly elected by a normal electoral process. Yeah. So that maintains a certain degree of legitimacy, if you like, in the transitional structures, and clearly that fact is going to be one of the absolutely key issues in shaping the attitude of the international community. And that international community, of course, it has as it looks at the situation in Madagascar, it can look back at what happened in the country 15 years ago, 16 years ago, with that previous transition, which was very difficult. But it can also look at what's happened in some of the countries in West Africa and West Central Africa, in the Sahel, in Guinea and in Gabon, which have seen completely open, what you might call full-scale military coups, and the contrasting experience of different countries within that group. And the Sahel countries have chosen to, the military have chosen to establish a essentially a military-dominated regime and pushed the prospect of elections into the very distant future. And those countries have seen there are huge difficulties in their relations with international donors and with international partners. But Guinea and particularly Gabon did not take that course. And in Gabon, the takeover was, as has happened in Madagascar now, essentially completely peaceful. And there was a very broad-based political conversation that was organized straight afterwards, very quickly, after the 2023 coup, in which even members of the old government were involved, as well as the opposition and civil society. And Gabon managed to maintain a sort of broad spread of its normal international relations, and it's already held its presidential and now most recently parliamentary elections to complete the transition process. There are some differences from Madagascar. Gabon is a small country that has oil, a lot of resources, and is not really very dependent on development aid. So that's very different. Madagascar has a large population, not far short of 30 million, and has a lot of poverty and big development challenges. So Madagascar needs aid and development support in a way that Gabon does not. But the Gabon transition is an example of how, if carefully managed and with a very activist diplomatic approach, sometimes a country can move through this transitional situation without too much damage to its international relationships. And that helps. Of course, if you've got aid still flowing, if you've still got an IMF program in place or whatever, all those things can actually help to tackle some of these social problems that have been so deep-seated as well.
Okay. Now, coming back to you, Professor, first of all, do we even know where the president's whereabouts, is? Where he is right now? Because he said he left the country in fear of his life and was sheltering in a safe space. Do we have an idea where he is at the moment?
Yes, he's in Dubai.
Oh,
I
wow.
think the French refused to host him, fearing that of being accused to back the return or any opposition movement. But I would like to come back to the problem of international community. I would like to say that according to Malagasy constitution, former constitution that was set by Rajoelina's administration itself, as soon as you ask for another nationality, you lose your Malagasy nationality, and that is the case of Andry Rajoelina, who then violated his own constitution, and it's kind of treason. And this is not that funny, but the strange situation is that 60 years after the independence, the beginning of the independence period, a Pan-African organization such as the SADC is headed by someone who does not have an African passport.
All right. So, but what exactly is the significance of him leaving the country?
I think he fled the country,
in such a manner.
and that's why, to my opinion, all the members of the parliament voted for his
Impeachment.
for the impeachment, including his partisans, because his partisans were the most numerous, composing the majority of the parliament.
All right. Now, Paul, Professor did say that right now he is in Dubai, but even at the moment he remains defiant, claiming that he is still fully in office. Is there any immediate threat of a counter-coup or civil war if he attempts to mobilize loyalists within the military or even the population from exile? Because even Professor did say that the military in itself is divided.
Yeah, the risk is there, but I don't think it's that important for many reasons, because most of the leaders of the organization he used to use to govern the country are also out of Madagascar.
Okay, so let's hear from Paul as well. Paul, please go ahead.
Well, I think again there are a couple of episodes which suggest that from a position, once you are no longer in control of the institutions, once you're no longer in power, it would be very difficult, even if you do have some support among elements of the military. There was a previous president, Didier Ratsirac, who back after an election dispute more than 20 years ago now, and I think the professor will correct me, but I think it was 2021, 22, 2020, somewhere around there. They eventually, most of the state system shifted over to support the man who was later confirmed as the election winner, Marc Ravalomanana. Ratsirac disputed this, and he actually retreated to his home region and had the support of a few members of the military, and briefly tried to maintain a sort of separate stance, a sort of challenge to what had happened in the capital. But it didn't last very long. And then again, we had back in after Ravalomanana himself was forced out in 2009. He mounted from exile. He mounted a purely political campaign, giving speeches that were projected onto screens for his supporters back home. But although he had a significant political movement and he had a track record and a certain agenda and a certain profile, that wasn't enough to, on its own, to displace him or bring him back to power. I mean, he was able eventually to return to domestic politics in Madagascar, but he didn't regain national power and he didn't win the subsequent election. So it's the idea that Mr. Rajoelina from Dubai, of all places, so not even in the region, and a place that is perceived as the hangout of the rich and the comfortable, if you like, and a country that has absolutely no democratic institutions of any kind itself, or an emirate that has no democratic institutions in a country, the UAE, which is not democratic. The idea that from there, Rajoelina will be able to mount some sort of movement that mobilizes enough of the military to try and stage a counter-coup, I personally would have thought is rather unlikely. I don't know what the professor would feel, but that would be my impression.
All right. Now, Professor Randrianja, let's quickly touch on the role of the military, because we know CAPSAT, which played a key role in the 2009 coup that first brought in the president, to power, said it had taken control of the military. So how does the 2009 coup inform what may happen now, especially in terms of how CAPSAT operates?
What may happen now? That's very heavy question. I think that the main problem is to quench all the demands coming from different parts and sections of the society, because the Gen Z movement opened like a Pandora box, allowing many parts of the society to express their concern. And so expectations are very high, and they won't be like satisfied on the spot, and that could create some difficulties to the traditional authorities. I think that's why they, among others, they keep the parliament as it is, and they are going to form a government, as they say, with a majority of civilian political personalities, and what I mean is the main concern right now is to restore confidence toward the state, security of people and their goods, and social peace to some extent.
Oh, okay. Coming back to you, Paul. Now, this particular renovation period is meant to last a maximum of 2 years, right? And we expect a lot of things to be in place within that time. But how realistic is this timeline? And what needs to be in place to ensure that the transition is inclusive, credible, and also avoids a repeat when it comes to instability?
Well, I think on one level there's a fairly difficult conversation to have initially, but after then to ensure what you might call the short-term transition. Once you move beyond that, and the question is how you decide exactly on the shape of the constitution that will be either restored or a new constitution. And I've seen some commentary suggesting that Madagascar might go back to a model that was used in many Francophone African countries in the early 1990s, when many of them were moving away from authoritarian rule to multi-party political elected systems. And that is the concept of a national conference, where you organize a gathering at which not just conventional politicians, but a wide range of different interest groups and voices in society, business, students, the churches, other religious leaders, trade unions, as well as politicians, farmers' organizations, perhaps. You get a very broad spread of people, and you discuss the shape of the new political system that you want to have. And that at the time, in quite a few countries, that was quite a successful process for agreeing a new political framework. But even once you've agreed it, and even once you get past the first, you then organize, probably with the support of the African Union and SADC and so on, fresh elections, that doesn't guarantee long-term success, because you're still left with all the big political and economic and development challenges that were already there. And that is a very difficult. That's a very difficult thing, because many of those challenges are hugely complex and relate to deep-seated social or political factors that are not going to be resolved in 2 years. But I think it's plausible to imagine that a workable 2-year transition framework can happen with political will and with the goodwill, obviously, of CAPSAT and other security forces, and that can be carried through. But that possibly on terms, because the National Assembly is still there, possibly on terms that mean that Madagascar is able to maintain its development partnerships with the key donors and supportive international organizations. But then you still have the huge problems of deprivation and development that remain to be tackled after that.
All right.
After the transition.
Oh, okay, so let's have your final thoughts. So we're winding down. Let's begin with Professor Randrianja.
My wish is that all the section of the Malagasy population, and mainly the young rural section, which has been not excluded, but which didn't take part to this GZ movement, or anyway launched by the GZ movement, could take part to the building of this dream new society. If you look at the 2002, 1972, or the 2025 social movements, all of them were led by the equivalent of GZ, the current GZ, and all those movements were then swallowed by a system which is becoming more and more efficient, predatory system along with mafia network. So maybe in 72 they were in the 80s there were 200,000 young people joining the job market. Now we are 30 millions of Madagascar, a little bit more. It should be 600,000 of young people, and that is a systemic problem. That's a main problem, which is at the basis of those social and political instability. The traditional, so-called traditional society, especially in rural area, is based on gerontocracy, and it is very patriarchal. And I think we have to make a choice if you want to keep this so-called traditional society, which is, or to choose another way of living together.
All
right. Now let's quickly hear yours, Paul.
Well, I completely accept. I think that, as the professors explained, there are these deep societal questions to be examined. So, in a sense, I come back to just the point I was making before, that if you can get relatively quickly an agreement on the framework for the transition and how it will function, and one that is able to maintain the endorsement, the support of the key African organizations, international community. So the African Union, the Southern African Development Conference, SADC, and the Indian Ocean Commission. Those things will be quite important. If those organizations decide to back whatever constitutional structure is arranged for the transition, then probably the wider international community will back it and endorse it and maintain support. But then those somehow, if the transition can carry through successfully, it then requires real political skill from whoever ends up of the leading figures in that process to help Madagascar address these deeper questions that the professor has told us about.
All right. Well, thank you so much, gentlemen, for your time and for taking time out of your busy schedule to speak to us on this. We really appreciate you, Mr. Sololo Randrianja, Professor of Political History, University of Toamasina in Madagascar. And we also had Paul Melly, Consultant Fellow, African Program, Chatham House in London, UK. Thank you.
Thank you.